Single note. 100 detectives, and a city holding its breath. When a young woman vanishes without a trace, all that's left behind is a message tied to a tree. I trusted you, but who betrayed her? And why? The answer lies buried in silence, and one detective is about to risk everything to find it. Thank you so much for watching, and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from, and why you're following this. The autumn rain fell in steady sheets across Boston's cobblestone streets, turning the gas-lit avenues into rivers of amber light. It was October of 1898, and the city hummed with the energy of a new century approaching, though few could have imagined the peculiar events that would soon unfold within its borders. Detective James Thornton stood beneath the dripping eaves of the Massachusetts State Police headquarters, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the wet pavement. At 32 years of age, he had already made a name for himself among Boston's finest, his sharp mind and unwavering dedication earning him respect throughout the department. His dark hair, slightly dampened by the mist, framed a handsome face, marked by intelligent gray eyes that missed nothing. The cut of his wool overcoat spoke of careful attention to detail, much like the man himself. He pulled his pocket watch from his vest, noting the hour with a slight frown. The summons from Chief Inspector Wallace had been urgent, and James had cut short his investigation into a series of warehouse thefts to answer it. The brass gleamed dully in the gaslight as he returned the timepiece to its place and stepped back into the warmth of the building. The interior of the headquarters buzzed with unusual activity. Officers hurried past with stacks of files, their faces grave. Something significant had occurred, though no one seemed willing to speak of it openly. James climbed the marble staircase to the second floor, his footsteps echoing in the high-ceilinged corridor. Chief Inspector Wallace's office door stood ajar. Through it, James could see not only his superior, but also a gathering of men he recognized as some of the city's most distinguished detectives. His curiosity deepened. "Thornton, come in," Wallace called, gesturing him forward. The chief inspector was a robust man in his 50s with silver hair and a mustache that spoke of military precision. "Gentlemen, this is Detective James Thornton. James, you're the last to arrive." James entered to find himself among an extraordinary assembly. He recognized Detective Howard Chen from the Chinatown Division, the brilliant Inspector Thomas Blackwell who had solved the Museum Street murders, and at least 15 other detectives of considerable reputation. The room felt crowded with talent and ambition. "I've called you all here for a matter of utmost delicacy," Wallace began, moving to stand before a large map of Boston pinned to his wall. 3 days ago, Miss Catherine Whitmore, daughter of Judge Harrison Whitmore, vanished from her family's estate in Beacon Hill. A murmur rippled through the assembled men. The Whitmore name carried weight in Boston society. Judge Whitmore had presided over some of the most important cases in the state, and his family's reputation was beyond reproach. Wallace continued, his voice steady but grave. Miss Whitmore was last seen by her maid on the evening of October 3rd, retiring to her room after dinner. By morning, she was gone. No signs of struggle, no ransom demands, nothing taken from the house. For 3 days, we've had our best men searching, questioning, following every conceivable lead. And, prompted Inspector Blackwell, and this morning, something changed. Wallace produced a sealed envelope from his desk drawer. A groundskeeper at the Boston Common found this tied to an old oak tree near the frog pond. It was secured with a blue ribbon, the same shade Miss Whitmore was wearing the night she disappeared. He opened the envelope carefully, withdrawing a single sheet of cream-colored stationery. The handwriting was elegant, unmistakably feminine. Wallace read aloud, "I trusted you." The words hung in the air like smoke. Below the message, written in the same graceful script, was a single name, Catherine Whitmore. The note was addressed to no one, Wallace explained, but given its location and the public nature of its display, we must assume it was meant to be found. What troubles me most, gentlemen, is the implication. Miss Whitmore trusted someone, and that trust was apparently betrayed. But who? And why would she leave such a cryptic message rather than simply calling for help? James studied the note from his position near the window. Even from a distance he could see the careful formation of each letter, the steady hand that had written them. This was not a message written in haste or fear, but with deliberate purpose. "Judge Whitmore has made many enemies over the years," offered Detective Chen. "Perhaps this is revenge of some sort. Perhaps." Wallace acknowledged. But here's where matters become more complex. I've assigned this case to all of you. 100 of the finest detectives Massachusetts has to offer, all working toward the same goal, finding Miss Catherine Whitmore and unraveling this mystery. The announcement was met with surprised silence. Never before had such resources been devoted to a single case. You'll work independently but share all findings through daily briefings, Wallace continued. The judge has considerable influence and he's demanding results. More importantly, a young woman's life may hang in the balance. I want this solved quickly and quietly. The press has already begun circling like vultures. We need answers before this becomes a sensation. As the meeting dispersed and assignments were distributed, James found himself studying the note once more. Wallace noticed his lingering attention. Something on your mind, Thornton? The handwriting, James replied thoughtfully. It's remarkably controlled. And the message itself, it suggests betrayal. But there's no anger in those words. No accusation, really. Just a statement of fact. I trusted you. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Miss Whitmore may have left this note herself, and if she did, she wasn't fleeing in terror. She was making a point. James paused, his mind already working through possibilities. With your permission, sir, I'd like to interview the family directly. Not just the judge, but the household staff, friends, anyone who knew her well. Wallace nodded approvingly. The family is expecting us. I'll arrange for you to visit the estate tomorrow morning. In the meantime, familiarize yourself with everything we know about Catherine Whitmore. The file Wallace provided was surprisingly thin. Catherine Whitmore, age 26, unmarried, educated at the finest schools Boston could offer. She was known for her charitable work, particularly with the women's literacy programs in the North End. She had no known suitors, though several young men of good family had expressed interest over the years. Her mother had passed away 5 years prior, leaving Catherine to manage the household alongside her father. The photograph included in the file showed a young woman of striking beauty. Dark hair swept up in the fashion of the day, intelligent eyes that seemed to look directly through the camera, a slight smile playing at her lips. There was something in her expression that suggested depth of character, a quality that went beyond mere physical attractiveness. She wore a high-collared dress adorned with delicate lace and a cameo brooch at her throat. Everything about her spoke of refinement and grace. James found himself studying that photograph long into the evening, even after he'd returned to his modest apartment on Charles Street. Something about Catherine Whitmore's expression intrigued him, a sense that she held secrets behind those eyes, knowledge that the camera could only hint at but never fully capture. The following morning dawned clear and cold, the previous day's rain having washed the city clean. James dressed carefully in his best suit, a charcoal gray affair that his sister had insisted he purchase for important occasions. If he was to interview Boston's elite, he would look the part. The Whitmore estate occupied a prominent position on Mount Vernon Street, its red brick facade and black shutters speaking of old money and established position. A wrought iron fence enclosed a small but meticulously maintained garden, now heavy with autumn leaves. James paused at the gate, taking in the scene before him. The door was answered by an elderly butler whose dignified bearing suggested decades of service. "Detective Thornton, I presume. Judge Whitmore is expecting you in his study." The interior of the house was as impressive as its exterior promised. Rich mahogany paneling lined the entrance hall, and a grand staircase curved upward to the second floor. Oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors gazed down from the walls, and the scent of beeswax and old books permeated the air. Judge Harrison Whitmore rose from behind his desk as James entered the study. He was a man in his 60s, tall and distinguished, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that had no doubt intimidated countless witnesses over the years. But now those eyes held something else. Worry, barely concealed beneath a mask of composure. "Detective Thornton," the judge said, extending his hand. "Chief Inspector Wallace speaks highly of you. Please, sit." "Thank you for seeing me, Your Honor. I know this must be a difficult time." "Difficult?" The judge's voice cracked slightly before he regained control. "My daughter has been missing for 4 days. Every hour that passes feels like an eternity. But I have faith in the police, and I will cooperate in any way necessary to bring Catherine home." James withdrew his notebook, preparing to take notes. "I'd like to ask you about the days leading up to your daughter's disappearance. Did you notice anything unusual in her behavior? Any changes in routine, unexpected visitors, letters that troubled her?" The judge considered this carefully. Catherine has always been independent, strong-willed like her mother. In the weeks before she vanished, she seemed preoccupied, perhaps troubled by something. When I asked, she assured me all was well, but I sensed she was keeping something from me. Did she mention any concerns? Any conflicts with friends or acquaintances? No, nothing of that nature. Catherine maintained a small circle of close friends, mostly women involved in her charitable work. She was dedicated to helping others, particularly those less fortunate. The judge's voice softened with paternal pride. She believed education could transform lives, and she worked tirelessly to provide reading instruction to immigrant women and their daughters. James made careful notes. The message found at Boston Common, the one that bore her name. Have you any idea what it might refer to? Who she might have trusted? The judge's expression darkened. That message haunts me, Detective. Catherine was cautious in her friendships, slow to trust, but loyal once that trust was given. For her to feel betrayed by someone? He trailed off, struggling with emotion. Your Honor, James said gently, I wonder if I might speak with the household staff. Sometimes servants notice details that others might miss. Judge Whitmore nodded, rising from his chair. Of course. I'll have Mrs. Patterson, our housekeeper, gather everyone in the servants' hall. She's been with our family for 20 years and knew Catherine since she was a child. The servants' hall was a modest but clean space on the ground floor, where the household staff took their meals and moments of rest. Mrs. Patterson proved to be a formidable woman in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that assessed James with shrewd intelligence. Detective, she said, her voice carrying the faint trace of an Irish accent. We've been questioned already by at least a dozen of your colleagues. I'm not sure what more we can tell you. I appreciate your patience, Mrs. Patterson. Sometimes a fresh perspective can reveal new details. I understand you've known Miss Whitmore for many years? The housekeeper's stern expression softened. Since she was 6 years old, yes. I came to work for the family shortly after her mother hired me. Miss Catherine was a bright child, curious about everything, always asking questions. A sad smile crossed her face. She grew into a remarkable young woman. Tell me about the night she disappeared. Mrs. Patterson settled into a chair, her hands folded in her lap. It was an ordinary evening, or so it seemed. Miss Catherine dined with her father at 7 o'clock. They discussed her upcoming visit to the North End Literacy Center, I believe. After dinner, she retired to her room around 9, saying she wished to read before bed. That was the last time anyone saw her. Her lady's maid didn't attend her that evening. Mary did help her prepare for bed, yes. I should clarify, Mary was the last to see her. The girl helped Miss Catherine change into her nightdress and brush her hair as usual. Miss Catherine dismissed her around 9:30, saying she would read for a while longer. James made notes carefully. And in the morning, Mary discovered her absence when she brought morning tea at 7 o'clock. The bed had been slept in, but Miss Catherine was gone. Her nightdress was folded neatly on the chair, and her day clothes from the previous evening were missing, along with her warm cloak and walking boots. This detail caught James's attention. She dressed herself, without assistance? Miss Catherine was quite capable of dressing herself, Detective. She often did so when she wanted privacy or was in a hurry. But yes, it was unusual for her to leave so early without telling anyone. Was anything else missing? Jewelry, money, personal items? Mrs. Patterson shook her head. Nothing of value. Though, she hesitated, glancing toward the door as if checking for eavesdroppers. There was one thing, a small leather journal she kept on her nightstand. It was gone. A diary? I believe so, yes. Miss Catherine wrote in it most evenings. I saw her with it many times, though of course I never read its contents. That would be a terrible invasion of privacy. James felt the first stirring of a pattern emerging. Mrs. Patterson, in the weeks before she disappeared, did Miss Catherine receive any unusual visitors? Any letters that seemed to trouble her? The housekeeper considered this carefully. There was one visitor, about 2 weeks ago. A woman I'd never seen before. She came to the front door asking for Miss Catherine specifically. She was well-dressed, respectable-looking, perhaps in her early 30s. She gave her name as Mrs. Eleanor Ashford. And did Miss Catherine receive her? She did, in the drawing room. They spoke for perhaps half an hour, and then the woman left. Miss Catherine seemed thoughtful afterward, distracted. I asked if everything was all right, and she assured me it was, but I could tell something was weighing on her mind. James wrote the name carefully in his notebook. Did Mrs. Ashford visit again? No, but Miss Catherine went out several times in the following days. She said she was attending to her charity work, but Mrs. Patterson lowered her voice. I had the impression she was meeting someone. She seemed nervous, excited even, in a way I hadn't seen before. Did you mention this to the judge? I tried to, but he dismissed my concerns. He said Catherine was a grown woman and entitled to her privacy, and perhaps he was right. But now, with her gone, the housekeeper's voice wavered with emotion. James spent the next hour interviewing the rest of the staff. Mary, the lady's maid, was a young woman of 20, clearly devastated by her mistress's disappearance. She confirmed Mrs. Patterson's account and added that Miss Catherine had seemed preoccupied in recent weeks, often staring out windows as if lost in thought. She was always kind to me, Mary said, wiping tears from her eyes. Never treated me as less than human, like some employers do. She taught me to read, did you know that? Spent hours with me after her own work was done, helping me learn my letters. I would do anything to help find her. Did she ever speak to you about her personal concerns? Her friendships? Mary hesitated, then spoke quietly. There was something. About a week before she vanished, I found her crying in her room. I asked what was wrong, and she said she'd learned something terrible about someone she respected. She wouldn't tell me who or what, only that she felt betrayed and didn't know what to do. The word betrayed resonated with the message found tied to the tree. James pressed gently. Did she give any hint about this person's identity? No, sir. But she did say something strange. She said, sometimes the people we trust most are capable of the greatest deceptions. Those were her exact words. I remember because they seemed so unlike her usual optimistic nature. As James left the Whitmore estate, his mind churned with possibilities. Catherine Whitmore had been troubled by something in the weeks before her disappearance. She'd received a mysterious visitor, had been meeting someone secretly, and had discovered some terrible truth about a person she trusted. The note at Boston Common wasn't a cry for help. It was an accusation, carefully placed where it would be found and investigated. But who was Eleanor Ashford, and what role did she play in this mystery? James spent the afternoon at the city records office, searching for any mention of Eleanor Ashford. The name appeared on property records for a modest townhouse in the South End, purchased 3 years prior. Further investigation revealed that Mrs. Ashford was a widow, her husband having died in a railway accident in 1895. She had no children and kept largely to herself, though she was known to volunteer occasionally at the same literacy center where Catherine Whitmore worked. The connection was tenuous but significant. James decided to visit the literacy center the following morning, hoping to learn more about both women and their possible relationship. That evening, as he reviewed his notes in his apartment, a messenger arrived with an urgent summons. Another note had been found, this time tied to a lamppost near the public garden. James grabbed his coat and hurried into the night. The scene was already crowded with police officers when he arrived. Inspector Blackwell stood near the lamppost, examining a piece of paper by the light of a handheld lantern. "Thornton," he called out, "you'll want to see this." The note was written in the same elegant handwriting as before, on matching cream-colored stationery. But this message was longer. The truth hides where the forgotten learn to remember. Look where light meets shadow, where voices rise in chorus though no songs are sung. A riddle, James murmured, studying the words carefully. She's directing us somewhere, or leading us on a wild chase, Blackwell said skeptically. If this is even from Catherine Whitmore, anyone could imitate handwriting, but James was certain these notes were genuine. The paper quality, the handwriting, the deliberate placement in public locations, all suggested careful planning. Catherine Whitmore was communicating with them, leaving a trail for those clever enough to follow. Where the forgotten learn to remember, he repeated softly. It could refer to a library, a school, or the literacy center, suggested a voice behind him. James turned to find a young woman standing just beyond the police cordon. She was striking in appearance, with auburn hair visible beneath her modest hat and green eyes that sparkled with intelligence. Her dress was simple but well made, suggesting comfortable means without ostentation. She appeared to be in her late 20s, and there was something in her bearing that commanded attention. "I'm sorry, miss, but this is a police investigation," Blackwell said firmly. "You'll need to step back." "My name is Lydia Hartwell," she said, not moving. "I work at the North End Literacy Center, the same one where Catherine Whitmore volunteers. When I heard about the notes being found, I thought I should come forward. Catherine spoke to me several times about her work there. about how meaningful it was to help women who had been forgotten by society learn to remember their own worth through education. James stepped forward, intrigued. "Miss Hartwell, did you know Catherine well?" "Reasonably well, yes. We worked together every Tuesday and Thursday evening. She was dedicated to the cause, genuinely cared about the women we served." Lydia's expression grew troubled, but in recent weeks she seemed distracted, worried about something she wouldn't discuss. "When did you last see her?" "The Tuesday before she disappeared. She seemed agitated that evening, kept watching the door as if expecting someone. When I asked if something was wrong, she said she was meeting someone after our session ended, someone she needed to confront about a serious matter." "Did she say who?" "No, but she did say something curious. She said, 'Sometimes the most dangerous betrayals come from those who claim to serve justice.'" Lydia met James's eyes directly. "I've been thinking about that phrase constantly since I heard she was missing. Catherine's father is a judge. Could she have been referring to someone in the legal system?" The implication sent a chill through James. If Catherine had uncovered corruption or wrongdoing among those sworn to uphold the law, it would explain her cautious approach, her cryptic messages. She wouldn't want to make accusations without proof, but she also couldn't remain silent. "Miss Hartwell," James said carefully, "would you be willing to come to the station tomorrow and provide a formal statement? Your insights could be invaluable." "Of course, Detective Thornton." James Thornton. Their eyes met, and James felt an unexpected connection, a sense of recognition, though they'd never met before. Lydia Hartwell possessed the same quality he'd noticed in Catherine Whitmore's photograph, an intelligence and depth that went beyond surface appearances. "I'll come first thing in the morning," Lydia promised. "I want to help find Catherine. She's a remarkable woman, and she deserves justice." As the crowd dispersed and the note was carefully preserved as evidence, James found himself thinking not only of the missing woman, but also of the one who had just entered his investigation. Lydia Hartwell clearly knew more than she'd revealed in their brief conversation, and her connection to Catherine Whitmore might prove crucial to solving this mystery. The morning brought frost to the windows of James's apartment, delicate patterns of ice that caught the early sunlight. He rose before dawn, his mind already racing through the puzzle pieces that had accumulated over the past 2 days. Catherine Whitmore's disappearance was beginning to feel less like an abduction and more like a carefully orchestrated revelation. A woman determined to expose some truth while protecting herself in the process. He arrived at the station before 7 o'clock, eager to review the evidence before his meeting with Lydia Hartwell. The two notes had been placed side by side in the evidence room, their cream-colored surfaces luminous under the gas lamps. James studied them intently, searching for any detail he might have missed. "You're here early," came a voice from the doorway. James turned to find Lydia Hartwell standing there, escorted by Officer Daniel Morrison. She wore a deep green traveling suit that complemented her auburn hair and carried a leather satchel that suggested she'd come prepared with information. "Miss Hartwell, please, come in," James said, gesturing to a chair near his desk. "Officer Morrison, thank you. That will be all." Once they were alone, Lydia set her satchel on the desk and met his gaze directly. "Detective Thornton, I haven't been entirely forthcoming with you, and I believe the time has come to share everything I know." James leaned forward attentively. "I'm listening." "Catherine Whitmore confided in me more than I admitted last night," Lydia began, her voice steady but colored with emotion. "We became close friends over the months we worked together. She saw in me someone who understood the importance of what we were doing, someone who shared her passion for helping others. About 6 weeks ago, she told me she'd discovered something troubling during her charity work." "What did she discover?" Lydia opened her satchel and withdrew a folder filled with newspaper clippings and handwritten notes. "Several of the women we serve at the Literacy Center are wives or widows of men who were convicted of crimes in Boston courts over the past 5 years. Catherine began noticing patterns in their stories, inconsistencies that troubled her. She started investigating quietly, reviewing court records, speaking with the women about their husbands' cases." James examined the materials Lydia had brought. The newspaper clippings documented various criminal trials, from theft to assault, all presided over by different judges in the Massachusetts court system. The handwritten notes were in Catherine's elegant script, documenting conversations with the convicted men's families, questions about evidence, witness testimony, and legal procedures. "What pattern did she find?" James asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. "Corruption," Lydia said quietly. Catherine believed that some of the convictions were unjust, that evidence had been manipulated or suppressed, that witnesses had been coerced. But the most troubling discovery was that many of these questionable cases shared a common element. They all involved the same court clerk, a man named Charles Pemberton. The name meant nothing to James, but he wrote it down carefully. And what was Pemberton's role in these injustices? Catherine believed he was altering documents, suppressing evidence favorable to defendants, even fabricating witness statements. She spent weeks gathering proof, documenting everything meticulously. That's what was in her journal, the one that disappeared with her. She'd compiled a record of his crimes. Why didn't she take this to the authorities? To her father? Lydia's expression grew pained. Because Charles Pemberton wasn't working alone. Catherine discovered that he was being protected by someone higher up in the legal system, someone with the power to make investigations disappear. She was terrified that if she revealed what she knew to the wrong person, the evidence would be destroyed and she would be silenced. Do you know who was protecting Pemberton? She never told me the name. She said it was too dangerous, that knowing could put me at risk. But she did say it was someone her father trusted implicitly, someone who had dined at their home, someone who presented a face of integrity while enabling Pemberton's corruption. Lydia's voice trembled slightly. The last time I saw her, she said she'd finally found conclusive proof, something that would expose both Pemberton and his protector. She was going to confront them, give them a chance to confess before she took the evidence public. James felt his blood run cold. She confronted them. I believe so, yes. That's why she's missing, Detective Thornton. She trusted someone with her discovery, and that trust was betrayed. The note she left wasn't about personal betrayal. It was about institutional betrayal, about those sworn to uphold justice who instead perverted it for their own gain. The pieces were falling into place with terrible clarity. Catherine Whitmore had uncovered a conspiracy within the court system itself, and her disappearance was a direct result of that discovery. But she'd been clever enough to leave clues, cryptic messages that would guide the right investigators to the truth without revealing it to those who would suppress it. The second note, James said, retrieving it from the evidence folder. The truth hides where the forgotten learn to remember. Look where light meets shadow, where voices rise in chorus though no songs are sung. She's directing us to the literacy center, isn't she? Lydia nodded. I think so, but I've searched the entire building and found nothing unusual. If Catherine hid evidence there, she concealed it remarkably well. Then we search again, together. You know the space better than anyone, and I know what to look for. James stood, gathering the materials Lydia had brought. But first, we need to identify Pemberton's protector. Miss Hartwell, among the judges and senior court officials who knew Judge Whitmore well, who would have had both the authority and opportunity to shield a corrupt clerk. Lydia considered this carefully. There are several possibilities, but one name keeps coming to mind. Judge Whitmore's closest colleague and friend, a man who's been a fixture in Boston's legal community for 30 years. Superior Court Judge Edmund Ashworth. The surname struck James immediately. Ashworth? Is he related to Eleanor Ashford, the woman who visited Catherine? I don't know. The names are similar, but I've never heard of an Eleanor Ashford. Lydia's eyes widened as she made the connection. Do you think she was involved somehow? Perhaps a relative warning Catherine, or part of the conspiracy itself. James finished grimly. We need to find this Eleanor Ashford and determine her connection to both Catherine and Judge Ashworth. In the meantime, let's visit the Literacy Center. If Catherine hid evidence there, we need to find it before someone else does. The North End Literacy Center occupied a converted warehouse near the harbor, its brick walls weathered by salt air and time. Inside, the space had been transformed into a welcoming haven, with large windows allowing natural light to flood the reading rooms, and shelves lined with books donated by various charitable organizations. Despite the early hours, several women were already gathered for morning lessons, their voices a soft murmur of concentration as they practiced their reading. Lydia led James through the main room to a smaller chamber at the back, used for storage and private instruction. Catherine often worked here when she wanted quiet to prepare lessons or review materials. If she hid something, this would be the logical place. They searched methodically, examining every shelf, every box of supplies, every corner where something might be concealed. James ran his hands along the wooden boards of the walls, checking for loose panels or hidden compartments. Lydia sorted through stacks of books and papers, looking for anything out of place. An hour passed with no results. James was beginning to wonder if they'd misinterpreted the clue when Lydia suddenly gasped, "Detective, look at this." She was holding a copy of a poetry anthology, its leather binding worn from use. Between 2 pages near the center, a small envelope had been tucked, so thin it was nearly invisible when the book was closed. James took the envelope carefully. It was addressed in Catherine's handwriting, "To whoever finds this, if I am gone." Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded precisely. James unfolded it with trembling hands and read aloud, "If you are reading this, then my worst fears have been realized. I confronted Judge Edmund Ashworth with evidence of his corruption, his protection of Charles Pemberton, and the countless lives they've destroyed through their manipulation of justice. I trusted that even if he was guilty, he would have the decency to confess or at least allow me to leave safely with my evidence. I was wrong. The journal containing all my research is hidden in my father's library, behind the complete works of Shakespeare on the 3rd shelf. The false panel I discovered as a child has served me well. In that journal, you'll find documented proof of 17 cases where evidence was suppressed, witnesses coerced, and innocent men convicted to serve Ashworth's political ambitions and Pemberton's financial gain. Eleanor Ashworth, the judge's sister who changed her name to Ashford after her husband's death to distance herself from her brother's growing corruption, tried to warn me to abandon my investigation. She knew her brother was dangerous, but she also knew he was guilty. I could not in good conscience ignore what I'd learned. If I am missing or dead, know that I did not go willingly. Know that I fought for truth and justice, even when those sworn to uphold it had abandoned their oaths. And know that I trusted the wrong person with my life. Catherine Elizabeth Whitmore, October 7th, 1898. The silence that followed was profound. Lydia's eyes filled with tears, while James felt a burning anger rising in his chest. Catherine Whitmore had been brave beyond measure, and that courage had likely cost her everything. "We need to retrieve that journal immediately," James said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "And we need to find Catherine before it's too late." They left the Literacy Center at once, James already formulating a plan. He couldn't simply storm into the Whitmore estate and demand access to the judge's library, not without alerting Ashworth if the corrupt judge had spies watching the household. But he also couldn't waste time with bureaucratic procedures while Catherine's life hung in the balance. As they hurried through the streets toward Beacon Hill, Lydia kept pace beside him, her determination matching his own. "What do we do once we have the journal?" "We take it directly to Chief Inspector Wallace, along with Catherine's letter. Wallace is honest. I'd stake my career on it. He'll know how to proceed without tipping off Ashworth." James paused at a corner, scanning the street ahead. "But first, we need to consider where Ashworth might be holding Catherine. He can't have harmed her yet, or there would be no reason to keep her disappearance quiet. He's waiting for something, perhaps hoping she'll reveal where she hid her evidence. Or he's already searching for it himself," Lydia suggested. If Eleanor told him about the Literacy Center connection, the thought spurred them forward even faster. They reached the Whitmore estate within 15 minutes, both slightly breathless from the pace. James knocked firmly on the door, and the elderly butler answered with his customary dignity. "Detective Thornton, this is unexpected. The judge is currently at the courthouse. I need to examine the library," James said without preamble. "It's urgent, part of the investigation into Miss Whitmore's disappearance." The butler hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Of course. Follow me." The library was a magnificent room, lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound volumes. The scent of old paper and pipe tobacco filled the air, and a large oak desk dominated the center of the space. James went directly to the 3rd shelf, where a complete set of Shakespeare's works stood in matching bindings. James ran his fingers along the back of the shelf, searching for the hidden panel Catherine had mentioned. For several tense moments, he found nothing, and then his fingertips detected a slight irregularity in the wood. He pressed gently, and a section of the backing clicked softly, swinging inward to reveal a narrow compartment. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Catherine's meticulous handwriting, along with several official documents that had clearly been removed from court files. James withdrew the evidence carefully, his hands steady despite the racing of his heart. "We have it," he said to Lydia, who stood watch by the library door. "Now we need to move quickly." But as they turned to leave, the butler appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. "Detective, you have a visitor. Judge Edmund Ashworth has just arrived and insists on speaking with you immediately." James felt the weight of the journal in his hands, knowing that mere feet away stood the man who had corrupted justice and likely held Catherine Whitmore prisoner. He made a split-second decision, handing the journal to Lydia. "Take this," he whispered urgently. "Go out through the servants' entrance and take it directly to Chief Inspector Wallace at headquarters. Don't stop for anything. Don't trust anyone else. Tell Wallace everything we've discovered." Lydia's eyes widened with understanding and fear, but she nodded, clutching the journal to her chest. "What about you?" "I'll delay Ashworth. Keep him occupied until you're safely away. Go now, quickly." Lydia disappeared through a side door as James composed himself and walked toward the front parlor where Ashworth waited. The judge was a distinguished man in his late 50s, with silver hair and a commanding presence that spoke of decades wielding authority. But his eyes, James noticed, held a coldness that belied his cordial smile. "Detective Thornton," Ashworth said, extending his hand. "I've heard much about your investigation into poor Catherine's disappearance. I came to offer my assistance to Judge Whitmore as his oldest friend, and was told you were here examining the library. Have you found something significant?" James shook the offered hand, feeling the firmness of Ashworth's grip, the subtle challenge in it. "Just following routine investigative procedures, Your Honor, examining all the places Miss Whitmore frequented, looking for any clues she might have left behind." "And did you find any?" The question seemed casual, but James detected the steel beneath it. "Nothing conclusive yet. The investigation continues." James checked his pocket watch with deliberate casualness. "In fact, I should be returning to headquarters to file my report." Of course, but perhaps you could spare a moment. I'd like to discuss something with you privately." Ashworth's tone made it clear this was not a request. They moved to the judge's study, a room James had not yet entered. It was smaller than the library, but no less impressive, with law books lining the walls and framed commendations hanging above the fireplace. Ashworth closed the door behind them with a soft click. "Detective Thornton, let me be frank with you," Ashworth began, moving to pour himself a glass of brandy from a crystal decanter. Catherine Whitmore was a troubled young woman, brilliant certainly, but prone to flights of fancy, to seeing conspiracies where none existed. "I fear she may have fallen victim to her own imaginings." "What do you mean, Your Honor?" "She came to see me several days ago, making wild accusations about corruption in the court system, about innocent men being wrongly convicted. She claimed to have evidence, but when I asked to see it, she became agitated and fled. I've been worried about her mental state ever since." Ashworth sipped his brandy, his expression one of practiced concern. "If she's left notes or messages during her disappearance, they may reflect a mind unbalanced by stress and paranoia." James kept his expression neutral, though inwardly he marveled at the judge's audacity. Ashworth was attempting to discredit Catherine before her evidence could be revealed, to paint her as unstable and unreliable. "That's a serious suggestion, Your Honor. Do you have any proof of Miss Whitmore's alleged mental instability?" "Only my observations as someone who's known her since childhood, and my professional experience recognizing when someone is suffering from delusions." Ashworth set down his glass and fixed James with a penetrating stare. "I tell you this in confidence, Detective, because I believe you're an honest man. If Catherine has hidden any documents or journals filled with these accusations, I would consider it a kindness to bring them to me first, before they're made public and bring scandal upon her family. Judge Whitmore has suffered enough without his daughter's reputation being destroyed by the ravings of a disturbed mind." The manipulation was skillful, James had to admit. Ashworth was offering him a way out, a chance to suppress the evidence in exchange for what he framed as protecting the Whitmore family. It was the same trap Catherine must have faced, the same false choice between justice and loyalty. "I appreciate your concern for the family, Your Honor," James said carefully, "but I'm bound by duty to follow the evidence wherever it leads, and to report all findings to my superiors. If Miss Whitmore left any documents, they'll need to be examined through proper channels." Something flickered in Ashworth's eyes, a flash of anger quickly suppressed. "I see. Well, I suppose I can't fault a man for doing his duty, even when misguided." He moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing, Detective. Have you in your investigation encountered a woman named Eleanor Ashford?" James felt his pulse quicken, but kept his voice steady. "The name has come up. Why do you ask?" "She's my sister, you see." A troubled woman who harbors irrational grudges against me. If she's involved herself in this matter, I would caution you against believing anything she says. Family disputes can be quite ugly, and she's not above spreading malicious lies. I'll keep that in mind, Your Honor. James left the Whitmore estate with his mind racing. Ashworth's visit had confirmed everything Catherine had written in her letter. The judge was desperately trying to control the narrative, to discredit both Catherine and his own sister before the truth could emerge. But he'd also revealed something crucial. He didn't know where the evidence was hidden, which meant Catherine had successfully concealed it even under duress. But where was Catherine herself? James hurried back to headquarters, hoping that Lydia had arrived safely with the journal. As he entered the building, he found Chief Inspector Wallace waiting for him in the corridor, his expression grave. "Thornton, my office. Now." Inside Wallace's office, Lydia sat in a chair by the window, the journal open on the Chief Inspector's desk. Wallace's face was flushed with anger as he gestured to the evidence before him. "This is damning," Wallace said without preamble. "If even half of what Miss Whitmore documented is true, we have a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of our court system. Judge Ashworth, Charles Pemberton, and possibly others have been systematically corrupting justice for years." "It's all true, sir," James said firmly. "And Ashworth just tried to convince me that Catherine Whitmore is mentally unstable, that her accusations are delusions. He's attempting to discredit her before we can act on this evidence." "Then we need to move quickly. I'm placing Ashworth under surveillance immediately and issuing warrants for both him and Pemberton." Wallace closed the journal carefully. "But our first priority is finding Catherine Whitmore. If she's still alive, they're holding her somewhere, probably trying to force her to reveal if there are other copies of this evidence." "Sir, may I make a suggestion?" Lydia spoke up, her voice quiet but determined. "Eleanor Ashford warned Catherine about her brother's danger. She might know where he would take someone he wanted to hide." Wallace nodded. "Find her, Thornton. Take Miss Hartwell with you. She's proven herself invaluable to this investigation. I'll coordinate with the other detectives and prepare arrest warrants. We end this today." James and Lydia left headquarters in a police carriage, heading toward the South End address, listed in the property records for Eleanor Ashford. The afternoon sun was beginning to descend, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. Time was running short, and they both felt the urgency pressing upon them. Eleanor Ashford's townhouse was modest but well-maintained, with lace curtains in the windows and a small garden showing signs of careful tending. When they knocked, a woman answered almost immediately, as if she'd been expecting them. Eleanor Ashford was in her early 50s, with graying dark hair and eyes that held both intelligence and deep sadness. She looked from James to Lydia and seemed to understand at once why they'd come. "You've found Catherine's evidence," she said quietly. "Please, come in." Inside, the townhouse was furnished simply but tastefully. Eleanor led them to a sitting room and gestured for them to sit, though she remained standing, her hands clasped tightly before her. "I tried to warn her," Eleanor began, her voice heavy with regret. "When Catherine first came to me with her suspicions about my brother, I told her to stop investigating, to let it go. I knew what Edmund was capable of, you see. I've known for years what he truly is beneath that veneer of respectability." "Why didn't you come forward yourself?" James asked, not unkindly. "Because I'm a coward," Eleanor said simply. "Because he's my brother, and despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to destroy him. I changed my name after my husband died, tried to distance myself from the family, from the shame of knowing what Edmund had become. But when Catherine wouldn't listen to my warnings, when she insisted on confronting him," Eleanor's voice broke. "I should have done more to protect her." "Mrs. Ashford," Lydia said gently, "do you know where your brother might be holding Catherine?" "We believe she's still alive, but we're running out of time." Eleanor moved to a writing desk and withdrew a key from a hidden drawer. "Edmund owns a property that few people know about, a hunting lodge in the woods west of the city near Walden Pond. He inherited it from our father years ago. It's remote, isolated. If he's keeping Catherine somewhere, it would be there." She handed the key to James along with hastily drawn directions. "The lodge is about 2 hours by carriage. Please, detective, bring Catherine home safely. Don't let my brother's evil claim another innocent life." Within minutes, James had assembled a team of 6 officers, all armed and mounted on horseback for speed. Lydia insisted on accompanying them despite James's protests, and he finally relented. recognizing the same determination in her eyes that had driven Catherine Whitmore to pursue justice at any cost. They rode hard through the afternoon, following Eleanor's directions through increasingly wooded terrain. The autumn foliage blazed with color around them, beautiful and indifferent to the desperate mission that brought them into these woods. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, they spotted smoke rising from a chimney ahead. The hunting lodge was a substantial structure of dark wood and stone, nestled among tall pines. A single horse was tethered outside, and lamplight glowed in one window. James signaled for his men to spread out and surround the building while he and 2 officers approached the front door. "Police, open up!" James called, pounding on the heavy wooden door. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the door swung open to reveal Charles Pemberton, the corrupt court clerk. He was a thin man in his 40s, with nervous eyes that darted from James to the officers flanking him. "What's the meaning of this intrusion?" Pemberton demanded, though his voice lacked conviction. "Charles Pemberton, you're under arrest for corruption, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. Step aside." James pushed past him into the lodge, his hand on his revolver. The interior was sparsely furnished, clearly used infrequently. But James heard movement from upstairs, the creak of floorboards and a muffled sound that might have been a voice. He took the stairs 2 at a time, the other officers close behind. At the end of a narrow hallway, a door stood locked. James didn't hesitate, throwing his shoulder against it with all his strength. The wood splintered and gave way, and he burst into a small bedroom. Catherine Whitmore sat on a narrow bed, her hands bound with rope and a gag in her mouth, but her eyes blazed with furious life. She was disheveled, her dress torn and stained, but otherwise appeared unharmed. When she saw James, relief and triumph flickered across her beautiful face. James rushed to untie her, his hands working quickly at the knots while one of the officers removed the gag. "Thank God," Catherine breathed, her voice hoarse. "I knew someone would decipher my clues. I knew the notes would lead the right person to the truth." "You're safe now, Miss Whitmore," James said, helping her to her feet. "We have your journal. We have the evidence. Judge Ashworth's corruption is about to be exposed." "Ashworth isn't here," Catherine said urgently. "He left Pemberton to watch me while he went back to the city to search for the journal. He doesn't know you've already found it." Even as she spoke, they heard shouting from downstairs, then the sound of horses approaching rapidly. Through the window, James saw a carriage pull up and Judge Ashworth emerge, his face contorted with rage. He must have been alerted somehow to the police presence. "Surround the building!" James called to his men. "Don't let him escape!" But Ashworth had already drawn a pistol, firing wildly at the officers outside. The quiet woods erupted with chaos, gunshots echoing among the trees. James positioned himself protectively in front of Catherine as they descended the stairs carefully. In the main room, Pemberton had been restrained by one of the officers, but Ashworth burst through the front door, his pistol raised. His eyes found Catherine, and hatred twisted his distinguished features into something monstrous. "You foolish girl," he snarled. "You should have accepted my offer, should have let the past stay buried. Now you've destroyed everything." "No, Edmund," came a voice from the doorway. Eleanor Ashford stepped into the lodge, her face pale but resolute. "You destroyed everything yourself through your greed and corruption. This is where it ends." The sight of his sister seemed to break something in Ashworth. His gun hand wavered, and in that moment of hesitation, James lunged forward, disarming him with practiced efficiency. The judge crumpled to his knees, defeated at last. "Edmund Ashworth," James said formally, "you are under arrest for kidnapping, conspiracy, corruption, and attempted murder. Officers, take him into custody." As Ashworth and Pemberton were led away in chains, Catherine stood trembling in the center of the room, the full weight of her ordeal finally catching up with her. Lydia moved to her side immediately, offering support, and Catherine leaned against her gratefully. "Thank you," Catherine whispered, looking at James with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for not giving up, for following the trail I left. I was beginning to fear no one would understand my messages." "You were extraordinarily brave, Miss Whitmore," James said gently. "Your evidence will ensure justice is served, and that the innocent men wrongly convicted will have their cases reviewed." Eleanor approached her brother's victim, her own eyes wet with tears. "Catherine, I'm so sorry. I should have stopped him years ago, should have been stronger." Catherine reached out and took Eleanor's hand. "You warned me,
And you helped them find me. That took courage too.
We can't change the past, but we can ensure justice for the future. The journey back to Boston was slow and quiet. The prisoners transported in one carriage while James, Catherine, Lydia, and Eleanor rode in another. As the lights of the city appeared in the distance, Catherine began to speak, her voice growing stronger as she recounted her ordeal. "When I confronted Ashworth with my evidence, he seemed almost amused at first," she said. "He told me that no one would believe a young woman over a respected judge, that my father himself would think I'd been deceived or had misunderstood what I'd found. When I insisted I would go public regardless, he had Pemberton seize me. They brought me to the lodge, interrogated me for days trying to find out where I'd hidden my journal, if I'd told anyone else. I refused to answer. How did you manage to leave the notes?" Lydia asked, awed by Catherine's resourcefulness. A slight smile crossed Catherine's lips. "Ashworth allowed me to write a letter to my father, supposedly to reassure him I was safe and had left of my own accord. He thought it would buy him time, make the police believe I'd simply run away. What he didn't realize was that I'd prepared the real notes before I confronted him, sealed them in my reticule along with instructions for Eleanor to place them if I disappeared. I'd anticipated that Ashworth might react violently, you see. I came prepared." James shook his head in admiration. "You orchestrated your own rescue investigation. The notes weren't cries for help. They were a map leading to the evidence." "Exactly. I knew that Ashworth would search my room, my usual haunts, but I also knew that the right investigator, someone who truly cared about justice, would understand the clues and follow them to their conclusion." Catherine looked at James with open gratitude. "I trusted that person would be you, Detective Thornton." Their eyes met in the dimness of the carriage, and something passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. James felt his heart quicken in a way that had nothing to do with the danger they'd just faced and everything to do with the remarkable woman before him. The following weeks brought sweeping changes to Boston's legal system. The evidence in Catherine's journal led to the overturning of 17 wrongful convictions, with more cases under review. Judge Edmund Ashworth was tried and convicted on multiple charges, sentenced to 20 years in prison. Charles Pemberton received 15 years. The scandal rocked the city's establishment, but it also led to reforms that would help prevent such corruption in the future. Judge Catherine Whitmore, devastated by his friend's betrayal but proud of his daughter's courage, announced his retirement from the bench. He devoted himself instead to working alongside Catherine to expand the literacy programs that had indirectly led to uncovering the conspiracy. Eleanor Ashford, freed from the burden of her brother's secrets, became a vocal advocate for judicial reform and women's rights, using her experience to ensure others wouldn't suffer as she had. And James Thornton found himself spending more and more time at the North End Literacy Center, ostensibly to ensure no details of the case had been overlooked, but truly because he couldn't stay away from the two remarkable women who worked there. On a crisp November afternoon, 6 weeks after Catherine's rescue, James arrived at the center to find her working with a group of immigrant women, teaching them to read from a simple primer. She looked up as he entered, and her face lit with a smile that made his breath catch. "Detective Thornton," she greeted him warmly. "Or should I say James, since this is hardly an official visit?" "James, please," he said, returning her smile. "I was hoping I might speak with you privately, if you have a moment." Catherine excused herself from her students and led him to the small storage room where they'd found her hidden letter so many weeks before. The space felt different now, filled with hope rather than mystery. "I've been thinking," James began, suddenly finding himself uncharacteristically nervous, "about everything that's happened, about how your courage and intelligence brought justice to so many people, about how working alongside you and Lydia has been the most meaningful experience of my career." Catherine stepped closer, her dark eyes searching his face. "I've been thinking too, about how you risked everything to find me, how you believed in me when you had every reason to doubt, about how I feel when I see you, this sense of recognition, as if I've been waiting my whole life to meet someone who truly understands me." "Catherine," James said softly, reaching for her hand, "I know this is unconventional, and perhaps too soon after all you've endured, but I find myself hoping that our acquaintance might develop into something more. I admire you deeply, not just for your bravery, but for your compassion, your dedication to justice, your brilliant mind and beautiful spirit." "James," she replied, her fingers intertwining with his,
There is nothing I would welcome more. You've already proven yourself to be a man of integrity and courage, someone I can trust with my life and my heart. When you found me in that lodge, when I saw your face, I knew that something extraordinary had begun between us. He drew her closer, and she came willingly into his arms. Their kiss was gentle at first, tentative, and then deeper as months of tension and unspoken feeling found expression at last. When they finally drew apart, both were breathless, their faces flushed with joy. "I should warn you," Catherine said with a playful smile. "I'm not a conventional woman. I have no intention of giving up my charity work or my advocacy for reform. I wouldn't want you any other way," James assured her. "In fact, I was hoping we might work together on some of the cases that are being reviewed. Your insight would be invaluable." "A partnership in all things, then?" Catherine asked, her eyes sparkling. "A partnership in all things," James confirmed, sealing the promise with another kiss. Outside the storage room, Lydia Hartwell smiled to herself as she heard the murmur of happy voices. She'd suspected from the beginning that James and Catherine were meant for each other, two souls dedicated to justice who had found in each other not just a colleague but a complement to their very beings. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows of the literacy center, illuminating the women bent over their books, learning to read words that would open new worlds to them. It was a scene of hope and transformation, much like the story that had unfolded over these past weeks. 6 months later, on a beautiful spring morning in 1899, James Thornton and Catherine Whitmore were married in a small ceremony, attended by close friends and family. Lydia served as Catherine's maid of honor, while Eleanor Ashford watched with tears of joy, grateful that something beautiful had emerged from the darkness her brother had created. Judge Harrison Whitmore walked his daughter down the aisle with visible pride, knowing that she had chosen not just a good man, but an exceptional one, someone worthy of her remarkable spirit. As James and Catherine exchanged their vows, promising to love and honor each other through all of life's challenges, they both reflected on the strange journey that had brought them together. A mystery that began with betrayal and corruption had led them to each other, to a love built on mutual respect, shared values, and deep admiration. Their wedding reception was held at the Whitmore estate, in the very library where James had found Catherine's journal. The hidden panel had been left open as a reminder of the secrets uncovered and the justice achieved. Catherine's journal itself had been preserved as evidence, but she'd begun a new one, this time filled not with documentation of crimes, but with reflections on love, hope, and the future she and James would build together. As evening fell and guests departed, James and Catherine stood together in the garden, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The city stretched out below them, its lights beginning to twinkle like earthbound constellations. "Do you ever think about that note?" James asked, his arm around his wife's waist. "The one that started everything. I trusted you." Catherine leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "I think about it often. It was meant as an accusation against Ashworth, but it became a promise between us. I trusted you to find me, to believe in me, to see the truth. And you did. And now?" he asked softly. "Now I trust you with my heart, with my future, with everything I am," Catherine replied, turning to face him. "And I know that trust is well placed, because you've proven yourself worthy of it every single day." They kissed as the last light faded from the sky, two people who had found in each other not just love but partnership, not just passion but purpose. The mystery that had brought them together was solved, but their story was just beginning. In the years to come, James and Catherine Thornton would become known throughout Boston as champions of justice and reform. They worked tirelessly to improve the legal system, to protect the vulnerable, and to ensure that the corruption that had once thrived in the shadows could never take root again. They had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son, all of whom inherited their parents' passion for justice and their dedication to making the world a better place. But on that spring evening in 1899, as they stood together in the garden where Catherine had grown up, they were simply 2 people in love, grateful for the mystery that had united them, and hopeful for all the mysteries yet to be solved, hand in hand, heart to heart, for all the days of their lives. The note that had started it all, "I trusted you," had come full circle. What began as an accusation had become a foundation, the bedrock upon which an extraordinary love and partnership was built. And in the end, trust proved to be the greatest mystery of all, the one that, once solved,
unlocked everything else.